Art is the reverberation of the impermanence of life. As human beings, we come and go quickly, and we get to make works that stand as monuments to our time here. Enduring affirmations of existence. Michelangelo's David to the graffiti in a bathroom stall, and the first cave paintings to a child's finger-painted landscapes. They all echo the same cry: I was here. Creativity is an asymmetric skill. Once you can create something from nothing, it has the potential to scale infinitely. It can touch the lives of millions. It can give people hope or comfort the lonely or those in pain. It can carry you through darkness or help you relax in the light of the sun. It can live a life of decades, centuries, or millennia. The goal of art isn't to attain perfection, as the goal of any human life isn't to live in a perfect way. The goal is to share who we are and how we see the world. Art allows us to see what we are unable to see and yet already know. Efforts to portray a point of view on purpose often lead to a false representation. We hold on to stories about our perspective that are inaccurate and limiting. As Wayne Dyer said, when you squeeze an orange, what comes out is orange juice. When you get squeezed by life, whatever comes out is what's inside you. And part of that extract is a point of view you didn't even know that you had. It's baked into the art that you make and the opinions that you share. When you create, the art comes first, you come next, and the audience and third parties come last. There's an integrity to art. An idea is something pure, and our job is to transmute and transmit the idea in its purest form. Diluting the idea to appeal to an audience, a cultural trend, or to use it as a mouthpiece for a political agenda, or maximize its commercial potential, is to abuse the child the universe has entrusted you to nurture. You are the steward of this idea, and it is your job to support the idea into whatever it is supposed to be. It is not your job to change the idea or force it to conform to your agenda.
But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
As a team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw with our fingernails for that inch.
This is where we hold them. This is where we fight. This is where they die. And these fields die.
Hello, beautiful people. This is episode 10 of the Matt's Mindset Podcast, the pod that helps you stand on the shoulders of giants so you can achieve your dreams. Last week, we spoke pretty extensively about the need for self-education in a world of AI as we are finding ourselves in and will continue to find ourselves in. And one of the takeaways from that podcast was that humans will continue to dominate the realms of creativity and critical thinking for the foreseeable future, despite anything going on in the realms of artificial intelligence. So if you want to know more about that or more about why that's the case, then feel free to check out last week's episode if you haven't already. But to that end, I want to discuss something that's very near and dear to my heart, which is creativity and how to cultivate it in your own life and our own lives, because creativity is something that every person, it's innate to every person. Every person is born with it, whether or not consider yourself a creative person, whether you consider yourself someone that's an adjective that you would identify with, or it's something that you're not really sure what it means or how it applies to your life. Everyone is creative and everyone uses creativity on a day-to-day basis, whether you're aware of it or not. Creativity is what separated Australopithecus from Homo habilis. So when we were first apes in the African savannas, what separated us from apes is that we created tools to make our lives easier. We created tools such as fire, such as little spear points. We created things, and that's what separates us from animals for the most part. There are a lot of animals who are on different evolutionary tracks that are incredibly creative. It could be dolphins, it could be octopi, it could be different. It's interesting to see how animals that have taken completely different evolutionary tracks and adapted for their environments, creativity can also be seen in their evolutionary paths. But creativity for Homo sapiens and for us, it's a very innate part of our existence. And it may be, it is, but it may be a certain part of the emergent phenomena of consciousness. It may be part of why consciousness emerged in us is to allow for more creativity. But creativity at its heart is really just about problem solving. In the, as I had discussed pretty extensively, I even included a clip from this episode, but in the words of David Deutsch, you can't live an ordinary human life without coming up with new, good explanations for things. And that is where humans will continue to thrive in the coming years, even in a world of artificial intelligence. Because creativity exists on a spectrum, as most things or much of things in life are not binary oppositions or not binary. They are exist on a spectrum. Like there's certain degrees, certain shades of gray. And so on one end of the spectrum are just your kind of creative solutions to problems. That's kind of the basic creativity, we'll say. Like that's how creativity evolved, like I said, with like fire or with making spear points or something like that. Those are creative solutions to problems. They were things that didn't exist before, and then there was some sort of creative inspiration to try something, and then a realization that this is actually easier. This will make my life easier. And so that's basic creativity, we'll call it. And so these are things that we do every day without even really thinking about them. And at the end of the spectrum, at the other end of the spectrum, something that we might call pure creativity is art. That's what we would refer to as art, which is the purest expression of creativity. Which is less so about solving problems and more about just the pure expression, self-expression of creativity and of the forces that are beyond the self, which we'll discuss. I'll be discussing at length in this pod about art using Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, as his ideas that I've extracted from it that I've found incredibly helpful and useful, as well as that I've resonated with, as well as my own personal experience, having written 3 novels, 15 original pilots for television, and 8 feature-length screenplays. So these are things that I've come to know to be true about my own life, my own creative experience, my own creative journey, as well as Rick Rubin, who's been put forward as one of the most important producers of the last 20 years, music producers. So these lessons, I hope they help you connect with your own personal creativity so that you can create your own stories, solve your own problems, create your own mental models, just improve your life and decide where you want to go in this rapidly changing environment that we find ourselves in. So when it comes to art, the object isn't necessarily to make it. It's to cultivate a state of being that makes art inevitable. So it's not necessarily about forcing yourself to create art. It's about just getting into a state of being where the creativity, the self-expression is just leaking out of you. It's trying to burst a dam of your own consciousness where you have to express. And that's kind of the point of art, is to be in this, to open your aperture, to be in this unbounded state so that art just happens. Art just almost explodes out of you. Art is less so about nose to the grindstone, trying to churn out thing after thing after thing. That's craftsmanship. That's 100% part of the craft of whatever craft you choose, however you choose to express yourself. That was 100% going to be part of it. But it's about cultivating that state where you feel almost no choice but to self-express, feel almost no choice but to create. And so how can you tune into your own creativity? How can you cultivate this state of being, which makes art and creativity so inevitable? It's about connecting with what makes us human. Art's about connecting with what makes us divine, so even more than human. So when we can connect with the divine, with the ultimate intelligence, as I'd say in my Nature of God episode, and distill it through our creativity, through self-expression, we can create art, which, if done correctly, illustrates a truth about what it means to be you, what it means to be human. And when people connect with that, truth that you've illustrated, we have an emotional experience to that stimulus. And if powerful enough, the art will continue to live on as a cultural meme in our society. And the more powerful the truth that you've been able to distill and express, the longer the legacy that piece of artwork will have, and it will become part of what Carl Jung would describe as the collective unconscious. And we will discuss more about that later, because I have a whole section about that. But so where does truth come from? How do you express truth? How do you distill truth? Where does this come from? It doesn't come from us. Rarely will truth come from our conscious mind or conscious experience. We are simply the instrument. We're the as much as we play instruments and we choose a craft, we are the instrument. We are the instrument of the universe. We have individual tastes and value judgments about how we see the world that's based on the coding of our DNA and the experiences that we've had. We are a perspective of God having a human experience. So more about that. Once again, Nature of God episode, discuss all of that in detail. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed, which is the law of conservation of energy, which is a law of physics. It's something that we've agreed upon about the nature of the universe. So energy cannot be created nor destroyed, only repurposed. So Carl Jung, as I discussed, was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst who founded the discipline of analytical psychology and pioneered the theory of the collective consciousness and collective unconscious. According to Jung, the collective unconscious is a shared reservoir of human experiences, instincts, archetypes that are inherited from our ancestral past. It is a source of universal symbols and patterns that are present in myths, religions, and cultural expressions across different times and places. So this could be something like, why there are pyramids that popped up at different times in South America and in Egypt and in Asia and in the steppe, like all over the place, because this is a symbol that Jung would describe as collectively unconscious. And it's something that is almost like it's a symbol that's endemic to humans. It's innate to humanity, similar to which George Campbell's groundbreaking work, which I've discussed on this channel, the Hero with 1,000 Faces, or the monomyth, about how most, if not all, stories are either reactions to or against this hero's journey, which defines it. It's kind of reflective of the human life, but also reflective of almost every myth and culture that's ever existed has followed like this hero with 1,000 faces, this monomyth, which Jung would once again point to as the collective unconscious. It's a archetype, it's a pattern, it's a myth that everyone, as humans, we seem drawn to telling stories in this particular way. This is also similar to the concept of the Akashic records, which is believed to be just contain the collective experiences and knowledge of all humans who have ever existed, their consciousness, their past, their present. It's kind of like the idea that time is relative, as Einstein pointed out in general relativity, as he postulated and confirmed that special relativity, that depending on all sorts of factors, time is not a constant, time is relative. Einstein had a great way of just explaining this about how if you put your hand on a stove for 5 seconds, it feels like 5 years. Whereas if you're sitting on a park bench with a pretty girl who's interested in what you're saying, like 3 hours will feel like 5 minutes. So that's relativity of special relativity and the relativity of time. So that's kind of what the idea of collective unconscious or the Akashic records means, is that the collective experiences of humans, their consciousness, past, present, and future, are all kind of, you could say something like 5D, like in the fifth dimension. They're somewhere in the ether where we're not exactly sure where it is. It's inexplicable, but by getting in contact with the ultimate intelligence, whether through meditation or whether through creativity, there is a feeling that it is there, it's accessible, it's always there. And it's a repository of archetypes, symbols, and patterns that are said to be accessible through spiritual practices such as meditation. So both concepts really suggest there's a deeper layer of consciousness beyond the individual psyche, which is shared by all humans. So there's not just your individual psyche and your individual consciousness. There's a deeper layer of consciousness, which is shared by all humans, which we can tap into. It implies that this collective layer of consciousness holds valuable information and insights that can help individuals understand themselves and their place in the world. As a perspective of God, then it helps us understand who we are, why we're here, and what our place is in the world. There's a reason we're drawn, as this is a Rick Rubin quote from the book. There's a reason why we're drawn to gazing at the ocean. It's said that the ocean provides a closer reflection of who we are than any mirror could ever hope to be. It's because our consciousness, whether it's our consciousness or the collective consciousness, is expansive. It goes in every direction to the horizon and beyond, and then it goes, there's mysteries of the subconscious and the collective consciousness lurking far below the surface. The person who makes a piece of artwork today is not the same person who returns to the work tomorrow, just as you never step into the same river twice, because you are different and the river will be different the next time you step into that river. And that's what art is. That's what the purest form of artistic expression is. By tuning into the collective unconscious, you can receive insight and truth and channel it through self-expression, and through craft create art, a work of art. So how can we do that? How can we tune into the collective unconscious? As Rubin advises, the first step is to tune in. If you have an idea that you're excited about and you don't bring it to life, it's not uncommon for the idea to find voice through another maker. So if you are basically, you have to create space in your mind. So create peace, create calm, just as if you're trying to find something in the water, say you lost a ring, or you lost your glasses or something in the water, the worst thing you can do is splash around and stir up a whole bunch of mud and just maybe possibly kick it around or something. That's the worst thing you can do. So what you do is you just stand there very calmly, very still, and you try to look. You try to look for what you're missing. You create space in the mind, you calm the mind, and then you hold the question, or you hold space lightly, and then you allow whatever's going to come in to come in. If you receive an idea that you're excited about, it's not uncommon for the idea to find a voice. This isn't because this artist stole your idea, it's because the idea's time has simply come. It's a great unfolding that we're all privileged to be aware of and a part of. Ideas and thoughts, themes and songs and other works of art exist in the ether, as we said, the collective unconscious. They're ripen on schedule, ready to find expression in the physical world. So when there's a saying that when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and when the student has learned, the teacher disappears. And it's almost a similar thing, is when an idea has come, when an idea's time has come to come back into the world, because that's all, this a concept called intertextuality. It's like all stories are kind of just recycling of the same, I don't know how many stories, but it's rarely that you have a new story. You basically just have different iterations of the same story that need to be retold at this moment in time. And as humans, it's our job to draw down this information, transmute it, and share it. Because when an idea's time has come, it's because there's a truth that we're forgetting that we have to remember. And so people who are willing to make the space and connect with the collective, everyone's collective unconscious, whatever comes through, it's their job to then transmute it in the best way that they know how. There's always a certain time for certain ideas to arrive, and they find a way through us. I've certainly found this to be the case in my life. My counterfactual thought experiment was kind of my first novel about what would happen if the Nazis won World War II. What would that look like? And kind of as almost a cautionary tale. And it appeared to be maybe because World War II veterans and Holocaust survivors continued to age out and die out. It seemed like this was an idea that the universe wanted to reintroduce to society, because shortly after completing my book, it took about 3 years when I was in college, Man in the High Castle came out on Netflix, which is a reboot from the Philip K. Dick book, which I didn't even know existed. And but Man in the High Castle is basically the same rough premise. It's what would happen if the Nazis won World War II. And you might be like, oh, maybe coincidence, right? But like my iteration, my self-expression of that premise was vastly different from the series. But by the same token, the idea was kind of the same. Like, it was what would happen if the Nazis won World War II? What would that look like? What would the world look like? But even both works, which were created entirely independent of one another, included elements of alternate universes. It was a little trippy. And so just that was an example of the ideas time having come. And if you think that's just coincidence, I have another instance where a pilot that I wrote about basically a mother whose child was killed by raiders or whatever in a sci-fi galaxy space opera type thing. And she went on to, because of this, that's kind of her shadow, that's kind of her wounds, as you'd call it. And she went on to train and become the most feared bounty hunter in the galaxy. And then a bloody war broke out, or had been going on. And she was hired by one side of the war effort to steal a child from the other side, because the other side had captured a child, and the child had psychic powers that could turn the tide in the war. But when the bounty hunter steals the child for this other faction, the child reminds her too much. The child's like 10, and it reminds her too much of her own son, and refuses to turn it over to the other faction, and instead, because she knows he'll be experimented on, and instead chooses to go on the run with this child. And so I remember pitching this idea once I'd finished the pilot to a friend who worked at Warner Brothers, who was very politely waited for me to finish before, as a couple of years ago, before saying, "Have you seen The Mandalorian?" And I said, "No, that's that new Disney show that just came out. This is literally like the pilot had just aired for The Mandalorian." And I said, "Yes." And I said, "Yes, that's the new Disney show that just came out, the new Star Wars show." He said, "Yeah, it's like the same thing. Like, it's a space opera with a bounty hunter, with a child with psychic powers. There's a war that's been stretching across the galaxy, and one faction wants to capture the child to end the threat to its civilization." And so once again, the idea's time had come to just, for whatever reason, to be introduced into society. So whatever ideas keep nudging you, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to create, whether it be a book, a song, a painting, a business, a product, a vocation, whatever idea that is nudging you, follow it. It's a cosmic truth trying to find space, physical space in a world through you. And who knows, maybe you can manifest it better than anyone else. Maybe just as what happened, I wasn't in a place to be able to manifest those ideas the way that they needed to be, but I was nudged and called to create those ideas. So maybe if you're being nudged with an idea, with a song, a painting, a business, a product, you can do that better than anyone else. So whenever you get these nudges, know that it's literally a cosmic truth trying to find expression through you. Because this nudging, this energy we feel when we're struck by an idea, it's not generated by us. It's more like we get caught up in it. We've picked it up from the idea itself, from the work itself. It contains a charge. It contains an energy charge of its own volition, a contagious vitality that pulls us forward. Work that hints at greatness contains a charge that we can feel, like a static before a lightning storm. The energy of creation feels similar to another force that we're all much more familiar in the universe, which is love. Love is a kinetic draw beyond rational comprehension, as is an idea that's pulling you to manifest it into reality. It's an excitement. When you find an idea or a person that draws your interest, that makes your needle jump, so to speak, something that indicates it's worthy of your attention and perhaps your devotion. It holds the potential to sustain your interest and makes the effort that you will have to put forward worthwhile. And that's love, and that's a creative act. And art is just the circulation of energetic ideas. Like what makes them appear new, as I talked about, is we're combining them differently each time they come back. So energetic ideas swirl about in the collective unconscious, unconstrained by time. And when they're needed to be reintroduced to society, they nudge certain, like everyone, but certain individuals who can create the truth. They can manifest the truth at a time when it's needed by society. So they come back at different times. And like I said, this is also known as like intertextuality. So that's why something may resonate with us. Perhaps it's the familiar coming back to us in an unfamiliar form. It feels, it makes us feel at home. Or maybe it's something that was never known to us or unknown that we didn't realize we were looking for. It's a familiar feeling that we wished we knew how to define. Like, it's something that we've kind of always known that another person has not been able to describe in words or pictures. It's turning something from an idea into reality can make it seem smaller. It changes the unearthly into the earthly. It changes the imagination has no limits. The physical world does. The work exists in both. This is kind of similar to concept of Taoism, which the Tao that can be spoken is not the Tao, the full Tao. The Tao that can be understood is not the true Tao. It's the idea that the collective unconscious and the ultimate intelligence, once again, more on this, go back to my Nature of God series, is for us right now not really able to be understood fully, but we can give voice to it in the limited ways that we can and we know how to. So most often these hints of inspiration and direction, as Rubin would call it, source, they come from source, as he would call it. I would call it the ultimate intelligence. Some people would call it God. It's just however you want to define it, but just it's less about being it's not God in a supremely kingly sense. It's not God in a judgment sense. It's not God in a father type sense. It's more God about, like, if you're kind of a physics person, think about like the Higgs boson, the Higgs field, the electron field. Like it's something that permeates the universe and holds everything together. It's more about that and less about being some sort of entity that, snaps its fingers and makes light happen. That's how Rubin and I would describe source or the ultimate intelligence. So these hints, these directions are small. They appear as tiny signals traveling through the void of space, quiet and subtle. To hear, it's almost like radio waves. To hear whispers, our mind must be quiet. We must take time for introspection and quiet. Like I said about when you're looking for something that you've dropped in the water, you want to be still, you want to be quiet, you want to be able to look around and see if you can find it. So our antennae, as metaphorically, must be sensitively tuned. Boosting receptivity may require a relaxing of effort. If we're trying to solve a problem, trying can get in the way. Splashing upon stirs up clouds of mud. In relaxing the mind, we have a greater clarity to hear the whispers. In addition to meditation, we may softly hold a question in our minds as we go for a walk, swim, shower, or drive. Like I'm sure plenty of you have had the experience where maybe you can't tip of the tongue phenomenon, you can't remember a word, or you're trying to solve a problem, you're trying to think about how to solve a problem, and thinking does no good. But you go for a walk, you go for a swim, you shower, you go for a drive, and kind of without thinking about it, like you stop thinking about it, and suddenly the idea just drops into your mind, or the word that you couldn't remember what it was because of tip of the tongue phenomenon suddenly just drops into your brain, and you're like, that's the word. So the question is being worked on, held loosely in our awareness. We are posing it gently to the universe and opening ourselves up to receiving the answer. Sometimes the words seem to arise from the outside, at other times from the inside. Like it's anyone who's achieved the flow state in creativity, which all you have to do to achieve a flow state in creativity is just keep writing and you'll find yourself in it. It's almost like what's referred to as contemplation, where you have meditation and then contemplation. Contemplation is when you're aware that you're not thinking, or you're not aware that you're not thinking, you're aware of it once you're no longer in that state. It's kind of just pure awareness to exactly what you're doing. In the flow state, which if you're not a creative person, maybe you've achieved it in athletics and sports, where your body just seems to know what to do. Like in sports, for example, you've done so many iterations, your body knows what to do. Like it's like Steph Curry, when I saw this clip a couple weeks ago, when he imagine being this confident. He took a shot from beyond the 3-point line, and it bounced off the rim. And he had practiced so much. He was in a state of flow so much. He knew the court and himself so well that he asked for the ball back and bounced it on where he shot. And he realized it was a dead spot in the court. And so because he knew himself and knew the court so well, he knew that it should have gone in. And because it didn't, he knew there was a problem with the court. So that's like being in flow, when you know yourself and you know exactly how to do something, but it's almost like it's coming from outside of you. So however the root, whatever route the information arrives through, we allow it to come by grace and not effort. Inspiration cannot be wrestled into existence, only welcomed with an open state of mind. To buttress this point, analysis is a secondary function to our awareness. So kind of what I talked about with contemplation and meditation, analysis is evolved to help us solve problems, but awareness is really where true art comes from. So the awareness happens first as a pure connection with the object of your attention. So if something strikes you as interesting or beautiful, you're not rationalizing why you find it interesting or beautiful. Like, it's not like you see a beautiful woman and you think, oh, I like her because her face is very symmetrical, and like it's her cheekbones, her eyes happen to be tilted in the perfect reflection, fractal of her face or something. Like, you're not thinking about it mathematically. You're not thinking about it like from an analysis point of view. You're not thinking like, oh, like her hair is just like the perfect part in the way, like, you may subconsciously think all those things, and that's why you find her interesting or beautiful, but you're not, it's just pure awareness at that point. You see something and you find it interesting or beautiful. It could be a painting, it could be anything. And so that's what analysis is, a secondary function to our awareness. Like we when something happens, we have a pure connection with the object first. And then, so basically what Rubin tries to promote is try to just live that experience rather than try to understand it. Just try to live that experience. Only afterwards should you try to understand it. It's the same with creativity. It's the same with why you shouldn't try to force a theme or force a meaning. Just try to write the story and the theme will emerge. Like, machines will soon be able to, AI machines will soon be able to analyze things 10 times better than we can. So what we can do is it'll be a very long time before they'll be able to live an experience that is sublime, interesting, or beautiful as we understand it. The ability to look deeply is the root of creativity, to see past the ordinary and mundane, to get what otherwise might be invisible. So no matter what tool is used to create, the true instrument, as I said, is you. You have a craft, which is your chosen way of self-expression, or maybe several, but the true instrument is you. And through you, the universe surrounds us all, and through you, the universe that surrounds us comes into focus. It's not unusual for science to catch up to art, and eventually nor is it unusual for art to catch up to the spiritual. Think about science fiction books and movies of the past. Like, I think about 2001: A Space Odyssey, when he's on the spaceship heading towards Mars. I think at that point, to find the second obelisk, or whatever Kubrick calls it. But he's kind of talking on something that's kind of similar to FaceTime. It's like a little tablet, and he's talking to his family, and like we have FaceTime today. Like, it's not even a thought. So as science catches up to art slowly catches up to the divine, as I talked about. Like the science is kind of caught up, at least, to the idea of like Higgs field is like something that connects all of us. Like, we've observed in the CERN Institute, we've observed like the Higgs boson, which we postulated existed, but was finally demonstrably measured. So we know that there's like a field that connects everything. And that's something that we've kind of intuitively known spiritually since, the advent of like Taoism, like the fact that there is a ultimate intelligence that's greater than we can currently understand. And so art is kind of the way that we express truth that's difficult to understand scientifically or understand rationally. And then the spiritual is the spiritual. It's the fifth dimension, or it's whatever you want to call it. It's So art's the way that we express truth that's not yet explicable to the conscious mind, and yet is something that we all know to be true because we all connect with it. Material for our work surrounds us at every turn. It's woven into conversation, nature, chance encounters, and existing works of art. These transmissions can be subtle, ever-present, yet easy to miss. There's a saying that the ego yells, the intuition whispers. I'm not sure who originally came from, but I heard it from Steven Spielberg. If we aren't listening, these whispers will pass us by. So just notice the connections, the synchronicities, and see where they lead. A good way to do this is through a practice. A practice, as Rubin would define it, is an embodiment of an approach to a concept. So this can support us in bringing about the desired state of mind that we discussed, that we talked about. When we repeat an exercise of opening our senses to what is, opening our aperture, we move closer to living in a continually open state. We build a habitat where expanded awareness is our default way of being in the world. We take notice of the cycles of the planet. We choose to live in accordance with its seasons. We become connected, and we begin to see ourselves as part of a greater whole with its constantly regenerating self. And we may tap into this all-powerful propagating force and ride its creative waves. The purpose of a practice like meditation or Tai Chi, or it could be prayer, like if you're more Christian or something, it could be prayer, it could be rosary, it could be anything. It's not necessarily in the doing, just as the goal of meditation is not in the meditating. The purpose is to evolve the way that we see the world. And when we're engaged in these acts, we're building the musculature of our psyche to more acutely tune in, just as we work out to build muscle to be more readily equipped for like obstacles or tasks that we may have to undertake. The meditating or praying, contemplation, Tai Chi, yoga, praying the rosary, any of these things is to build the musculature of the psyche so that we can overcome any sort of mental blocks or obstacles that may come into our path. This is much of what the work is about, whether it's the work of creativity, the work of art, the inner work. It's about creating this musculature. Awareness needs constant refreshing, just as these ideas need constant refreshing. These energetic ideas have existed thousands of times before in different iterations, but each generation needs refreshing. And I think Carol Joyce Oates said this, where you're not the audiences that loved Hamlet, the audience that Hamlet was wrote for, the audience that Paradise Lost was wrote for, is gone. So it's incredible to draw inspiration from these works, but if you were to rewrite a story in the same exact style that Hamlet was written in, it probably wouldn't have a broad appeal. But Hamlet is recycled and completely reused and repurposed and put back into society. The ideas are put back into society in a show like Sons of Anarchy, for example, where it's basically about the rough story is kind of the same, the rough idea. The stories are completely different, but the beats are completely different, but kind of the framework about a prince, like a prince to an empire, to a prince to a kingdom, who has one or two paths to go down, and has kind of a stepfather who killed the king and married the queen, and now is directing him in one way, but also the ghost of the dead father is kind of telling the son what happened and moving him in a certain direction. It's the same idea, but it's reimagined in two different ways. And so if this awareness can become a habit, it will need to be reinvented again and again, until one day you notice that you're always in the practice of awareness at all times, in all places, living your life in a state of constant openness to receiving. A lot of your own personal self-expression will come from your taste and from your own metaphysical value judgments about the world. So how do you cultivate taste? Well, you make the choice of reading and experiencing kind of the best works, and also you can branch off and not so best or not so good works. But if you make the choice of reading classic literature every day, for example, rather than reading the news, by the end of that period, you'll have a much more honed sensitivity for recognizing greatness from books or from literature than from media. So this applies to kind of every choice that we make, not just with art, but with friends we choose, conversations we have, even the thoughts that we reflect on. All these aspects affect our ability to distinguish good from very good from great, great from excellent. They help us determine what is worthy of our time and attention. And this is how you cultivate like good taste. Like if you start with something that's good and then you read something that's better, that's great, then you read something that's excellent or watch something that's excellent, then you can cultivate taste and you can put a finger on when you see something that's not so excellent, you put a finger on why that wasn't so good. And you can also then begin to do this in your own work. When you kind of write, Jerry Seinfeld had talked about his creative process, and I completely agree and empathize with this, where you kind of have to, it's almost like your creative self is like a toddler. You just allow it to write whatever comes to mind. It's almost like, people talk about the vomit draft. You just kind of get everything on a page. And so that's kind of like your child, and you have to be very gentle and caring and supportive with your toddler, with your child. Just let it, color with crayons. And then your critic, when you come back and then you look at it, you revise, it's a completely different side of yourself, and you are completely critical of what came before. It's kind of when your critic comes out, and you have to be as Stephen King would say, you kill your darlings. You have to be very, very, very ruthless in cutting away what is not excellent. And that's how you cultivate taste and create greatness. Art's also about connection. There are sides of ourselves that aren't welcome in polite society, and as they should not be. We're socialized for a reason. Thoughts and feelings too dark to share. Like I talked about the shadow self and becoming aware of it in my Pride to Vulnerability episode. So when we recognize these in art, when we recognize the thoughts, feelings, emotions, impulses that are too dark to share, aren't welcome in polite society, nor should they be, we can feel less alone. We can feel like, this is part of the collective unconscious. This is something that's innately human. We feel more real, more human, more connected. When we're feeling alone, we can connect with a group of friends who love and care for each other, whether that's in the physical or whether that's through art. When we long for true love, we can watch or read sweeping romances. When we feel downtrodden, we can watch movies or connect with characters undergoing their own hero's journey. When we feel like celebrating, we can engage with books, shows, or music that showcases this feeling of the ecstatic. Art creates a profound connection between the artist and the audience. Through that connection, both can heal. Like art's a place where vulnerability can be revealed, and people can connect through true vulnerability. And allowing yourself to be vulnerable in your art can build the courage to allow yourself to be more vulnerable in your life. And being vulnerable in your life is how relationships are deepened and relationships are formed. And the whole point of art, according to the ancient Greeks, were kind of some of the early codifiers of art, will say, was to achieve catharsis. Catharsis can be defined as the process of releasing and thereby providing relief from strong or repressed emotions. So for the ancient Greeks, going to the theater was almost like a purifying event. It was almost like in the Hebrew tradition, not the ancient Hebrew, but kind of just the Hebrew tradition, the Orthodox Jewish tradition of women after going through their cycle, finishing their period, they would go into the purifying waters. It was almost like having an ordeal and then purifying yourself. That was kind of the whole point of art in ancient Greek society. Is when you went to the theater, it was to cleanse yourself. It was a place where you could forget about rules and decorum. It was a place where every aspect of the human experience could be put on display and was welcomed. It was in a darkened amphitheater, we could all connect with our emotions and what it meant to be human, and we could release them. We could laugh, we could cry. And you can see, according to this definition, why Martin Scorsese would refer to Marvel movies as theme park rides. It's kind of like, I think 100% totally fine with Marvel movies. I think they're more commerce than art. Once again, nothing wrong with that. It's kind of just everything has a place in our society. But they are movies. It's kind of a semantic issue, but I disagree with Scorsese that they're not movies. They certainly are movies, But I think I would agree with them in that they're less so art than they are commerce. It's also why fans of beloved franchises get so upset when characters who have shaped them, healed them, given them company when lonely, and been there for them at rock bottom even, are reduced to like one-dimensional shadows of their former selves, existing only to sell plush toys at $9.99 a pop. You've taken something pure and you're taking something that possibly millions of people connected with, and you wouldn't be an artist at that point, but you'd be someone who's entrusted with this beloved idea that has touched millions of people. And it's one thing if you make a creative choice, or you make a series of creative choices that people just don't agree with. I respect a person or an artist so much more if they take a beloved franchise, and they express it in a different way and they make it their own. It may not be as good as the original idea or story or franchise was, but the fact that they took a creative risk, I can be happy with, because I would rather them explore that universe more than try to create a carbon copy or try to make it disjointed. You can tell there's different, just conflicting interests that just don't make sense. Where I guess a quick good example of this would be the original Avatar: The Last Airbender franchise, one of the most fantastic stories in the recent years to be put on to be distributed. And then The Legend of Korra, which was the kind of the spin-off series, which had brilliant moments of its own. I don't think it was as tightly written, as funny, as good as the original series. But what I really respected about it is that they made very deliberate choices, creative choices, to make Korra almost the opposite of the original protagonist, Aang. And at times that made her kind of an unlikable protagonist, but they made very deliberate creative choices, and they explored a world that they made deliberate choices that explored a beloved world in different ways. And it was very refreshing to see that versus something like Star Wars, where you have the original franchise and you have the prequels, which were a little bit constrained just because they had to end up at a certain place. But I think generally on the whole did a pretty good job. A lot of the dialogue is pretty cringe, and some of it's not so good, but on the whole, at least they kind of explored new ground. And then the sequels, which are, the first one's just a carbon copy of A New Hope, and then the other two I just could talk about for a long time about how disappointing they are, but they do not follow how the characters would behave. The characters that we identified with and fell in love with, they kind of betray those characters. And so not going to get into it, but that's just how art can continue to explore or regress and become something commercial. So on that note, you have to know, as Picasso would say, you have to know the rules so you can break them like an artist. The most deceptive rules are not the ones that we can see, but the ones we can't. These are the ones that can be found hiding deeper in the mind, the rules and limitations that can be found hiding deeper in the mind, often unnoticed, just beyond conscious awareness. Rules that entered into our thinking through childhood programming, for example. Lessons we've forgotten, osmosis from the culture, things that we've absorbed, and emulating artists who have inspired us to try it for ourselves. These rules can serve or they can limit us. So just be aware of any assumptions based on conventional wisdom. Rules obeyed unconsciously are far stronger than the ones that we set on purpose, and they are likely to undermine the work. As you move away from the familiar or conscious rules, you may begin to bump up against these hidden rules that have been guiding you your whole life, these hidden limitations without your knowledge. Once recognized, these rules may be released or used with more intention. So that can be true for your work and creativity. That can be true for your life. As you kind of become more authentic or try to find your authentic self, try to find your potential, find your self-actualization, you may begin to bump up against some of these subconscious beliefs about, maybe you think, oh, I can't do that because blank, or no one does that because blank. And it's like, well, is that true? Is Is that actually true, or is that just a belief that you've absorbed? Patience. Patience is developed much like awareness through acceptance of what is. Impermanence is, this is something that a quote I love, that impatience is an argument with reality. It's kind of like, it's very stoic idea, stoicism. The desire for something to be different from what we are experiencing in the present moment is a wish to speed time up, for tomorrow to come sooner, or an aching to relieve yesterday, or to close your eyes and find yourself in a different place. That's all, it's antithetical to what we're trying to do. A Stoic saying is, when you go to a public, this is from Epictetus, when you go to a public bath, remind yourself of what you're likely to find there. There may be other people, there may be screaming children, heavily chlorinated water, not enough towels. The object isn't to wish for any of these things to be different. The object is to be in harmony with what is. That's how you can cultivate patience in your life. It's like the universe seeks balance. For the mind to draw inspiration, it needs space. By creating space in your mind, you're inviting inspiration. The same principle applies to everything in life. If we are looking for a new relationship when we are already in one, or can't move on from the last one, for example, we don't have that emotional space to accommodate a new one. To vary your inspiration, you should vary your inputs. Turn off the sound when watching a favorite film, or play music while muting the dialogue on that film. Read only the first word of each sentence in a short story aloud and see if something else emerges. Arrange stones by size and color and see if something connects with you. Learn to lucid dream, break habits, look for differences, notice the connections between unlike things, juxtapose things. Speaking of habits, discipline and freedom may seem like opposites, but in reality, they are partners. Discipline is not a lack of freedom, it is a harmonious relationship with time. It's from the Rick Rubin book. Habits that are not conducive to the work or to life may include believing that you're not good enough to create this idea, to manifest the idea, to be who you want to be, believing just who you are at this moment in time is not good enough. Like, I'll give you a little bit of a secret to life, is that you are good enough for anything that you desire. Desire is, while holding on to desire, while thinking that desires will make you happy, is kind of the root of suffering according to Buddhism. Your desires are also a guide map. Your desires are also a GPS. So if you can tune into your desires but detach from them, then they'll guide you to where you want to go. And by believing you're not good enough to have your desires, that's antithetical to what you're trying to do here on the earth, to cultivate a good life for yourself and to reach your potential, which will ultimately make the world a better place. Feeling like you don't have the energy it will take, mistaking adopted rules or beliefs for absolutes, as we talked about, not wanting to do the work, laziness, not taking the work to its highest potential, settling, like we talked about, if you're trying to just pimp out a project for commercial use, having goals too ambitious to even begin, that's just another kind of laziness, procrastination, thinking you can only do your best work under certain conditions or requiring specific equipment to do the work. It's just do the work. Just sit down every day, do the work. Abandoning a project as soon as it gets difficult, feeling like you need permission or acceptance to move forward, letting a perceived need for funding or equipment or acceptance get in the way, having too many ideas and not choosing one. As Mark Randolph, the co-founder of Netflix, said, all ideas are bad ideas. It's in the execution that you discover if they will work in reality or not. Never finishing projects. Like, you have, like, it's, yes, like the idea phase is fun because that's when ideas are grander and larger than reality, but until you can ground your abstractions into reality, until you can make something tangible, then you're not actually doing anything. Blaming circumstances or people for getting in the way, it's kind of like a victim mentality, like blaming like circumstances or people or blocking you or not accepting you, whatever the case may be. It's a limitation. Romanticizing negative behaviors, addictions, or patterns. I talked about this kind of extensively in actually my End of History podcast as an analogy. So like just the negative behaviors, like Hemingway drinking, or believing that you need a certain drug, or whatever the case may be, or you're an asshole, whatever you're doing. Like, no need to do that. You don't need to do your best work. That's actually antithetical to doing your best work. believing a mood or state of being must be present, impatience, distractibility, procrastination. So how do we achieve our potential? How do we reach our self-actualization? Well, as Rubin would point out, imagine you're going to live on a mountaintop by yourself forever. You build a home that no one will ever visit, but it will be your home. So you have to invest the time and the effort to shape the space in which you will spend your days. The wood, the plates, the pillows are all magnificent. They're curated exactly to your taste. This is the essence of great art. We make it for no other purpose than creating our version of the beautiful, bringing all of ourselves to every project, whatever its parameters and constraints. We do the best as we see the best with our own taste, which we have cultivated. If you think, I don't like it, but someone else will, you find yourself in the business of commerce, or you're creating a product to satisfy a need in a market. The more formulaic something is, the more it hugs the shore of trendy, the less art it is likely to be. Once again, there's nothing wrong with being an entrepreneur and creating something that's going to fulfill a need in a market, but the less likely it will be to truth and the less likely it will be to connecting with people. It will be something that is commerce. It will satisfy a need in a market. Nothing wrong with that. It's more about solving a problem and less about art. So it's creativity, but it's on the one side of the spectrum. So fear of criticism, attachment to commercial success, competition from past work, and aspiration of wanting to change the world, any narrative that differs from, I want to make this work the best that it can be, is I want to actualize the potential of this idea, I want to actualize the potential of myself, can kind of undermine the potential of an idea in the pursuit of greatness. So instead of focusing on what this will get you, whether this is an opportunity, a person, whoever, focus on pouring yourself into the art or into the experience so it can be the best that it can be. With the simple observation of doing great work, a ripple effect occurs. A bar is set in everything that you do, which may not only lift your own work to new heights, but raise the vibration of your entire life. It may even inspire others to do their best work. Greatness begets greatness. Living and speaking your authentic truth gives others permission to do the same. It's infectious. So then success, how should we measure success? I've kind of talked about this a little bit in the Create Real and Lasting Change in Your Life podcast, but how should we measure success? It isn't popularity, money, or critical esteem. Those are all great things, but they're latent functions. Success occurs in the privacy of the soul. It comes in the moment that you decide to release the work. It comes in the moment that you decide to live in your authentic truth, before exposure to a single opinion, when you've done all that you can do to bring out the work to its highest potential. Success has nothing to do with the variables that you can't control. If we can tune into the idea of making things and sharing them without being too attached to the outcome, the work is more likely to arrive in its truest form. In the same way, if we can connect with others without being worried about the outcome, how they perceive us, will they like us, what they can do for us, then this new relationship that we're cultivating, or even an old relationship, is likely to develop and continue to develop in its truest form. So on that note, connected detachment, when we're faced with challenges, as we inevitably will be, check out my resilience podcast, but consider detaching from the story of your life as it's happening. As hard as it may seem, seek to experience events as if you're watching a movie. You're observing a dramatic scene where the protagonist faces seemingly insurmountable challenge. It's you, but it's not you. Instead of sinking into the pain of heartbreak or the stress of being laid off or the grief of loss, practicing detachment might sound like, well, that was a plot twist. I wonder what's going to happen next. It's cultivating curiosity. The outcome is not the end. The darkness will not last, nor will the light. They live in a continual unfolding, a mutually dependent cycle. Neither is bad nor good. They simply exist. This is the practice of never assuming that you know the whole story. And it will support you in a life of open possibility and equanimity. When we obsessively focus on these events, they may appear catastrophic, but they're just a small aspect of larger life. And the further you zoom back, the smaller each experience becomes. Zoom in and obsess, or zoom out and observe. The choice is yours. If we allow this principle to work for us, our imagination frees us from the web of personal and cultural stories that threaten to engulf us. Art has the power to snap us out of our transfiction, open our minds to what's possible, and reconnect to the eternal energy that moves through all things. Have you ever felt pulled in, as if entranced while listening to a piece of music? How about reading a book or gazing at a painting? Have you ever allowed tears to flow unbidden during the climax and catharsis of a show or a book? This may be one of the reasons that you're drawn to creative work to begin with. It's the flow state that removes you from the world and connects you to the state of pure awareness with the ultimate intelligence. As Jerry Seinfeld once again would say, the work is the reward. Feel free to have an ice cream sundae afterwards. It will pale in comparison. This is ecstasy, the memory, the recurring experience of sensory joy. It's like taking a bite of fruit at peak ripeness. Now think of everything held in a work that comes before that moment of perfect balance. All the experiments that miss the mark, the ideas that go nowhere, the difficult decisions made, the darlings killed, the tiny adjustments which changed everything. What is the test that an artist can use in those crucial moments during the process? You could say it's a feeling, an inner voice, a silent whisper that makes you laugh, an energy that enters the room and possesses the body. Call it joy, awe, or elation. When a sense of harmony and fulfillment prevails, it is a rising of the ecstatic. It is so invigorating that it makes all the laborious, less interesting parts of the work worth doing. We are mining for these events, the moments where dots connect. The artwork is the point where all the elements come together. The immerse prism of self, the magic, the discipline of transmuting an idea into flesh. And if these lead you to contradiction and to territories that are seemingly unbridgeable or unknown, that doesn't mean that they're not harmonious. Even in perceived chaos, there's order and pattern, a cosmic undercurrent running through all things, which no story or concrete meaning is immense enough to contain. Wanting to outperform another artist or another person, for that matter, rarely results in greatness, nor is it a mindset that has a healthy impact on our lives. As Teddy Roosevelt pointed out, comparison is the thief of joy. Besides, why would we want to create or live with the purpose of diminishing someone else? Such a fate sounds like hell on earth. When another great work inspires us to elevate our own, this energy is different. Seeing the bar raised in our own field can encourage us to reach even higher. This energy of rising to meet is quite different from the energy required of conquering. We are dealing in the realm of magic. No one knows why or how it truly exists. You work not as an evangelist expecting miracles, but as a scientist, testing, adjusting, and testing again, experimenting and building on results. Faith is rewarding, at times more than talent or ability. After all, how can we offer art what it needs without blind trust in the process? We are required to believe in something that does not yet exist in order to allow it to come into being. Your path is unique for only you to follow. There is no single route to great art. This does not mean ignoring the wisdom of others. Receive it skillfully. Try it on for size. See how it fits. Incorporate what is useful. Let go of the rest. And no matter how credible the source, test and tune into yourself to discover what works for you. As children, few of us are taught how to understand or prioritize our feelings. For the most part, the educational system does not ask us to reassess our sensitivity, but rather to be obedient, to do what is expected. Our natural independent spirit is tamed. Free thought is constrained. There is a set of rules and expectations put upon us that is not about exploring who we are and what we're capable of. The system is not here for our benefit. It holds us back as individuals to support its own continued existence. This is particularly undermining to independent thinking and free expression, especially at this moment in time where cancel culture threatens the livelihood of any person from any field, and as dissenting opinions are branded conspiracy theories, and as blatant propaganda is espoused as fact. As artists and human beings, our mission is not to fit in, not to conform. Our purpose is to value and develop our understanding of others and the world around us, and cultivate respect for the authenticity of others. We extend our reach for a higher consciousness, releasing attachment to our perceived self and limitations. We are seeking not to define ourselves, but to expand ourselves, to tune into the limitlessness of nature and connection to all that is. Self-awareness is a transcendence, an abandonment of the ego, of letting go. We are part of a constant, interconnected cycle of birth, death, and regeneration. Our bodies decay into the earth and bring forth new life. Our energetic mind is returned to the universe to be repurposed. Energy is never created nor destroyed, only repurposed. Art exists in the same cycle of death and rebirth. We participate in this by completing one project so that we can begin anew. As in life, each ending invites a fresh beginning. When consumed with a single work to the degree that we believe it's our life's mission, there's no room for the next one to develop. Just as when we can't let go of the past or embrace new experiences, our life becomes stale. The artist's goal is greatness, but there are moments of perfect ripeness, of balance. And at that moment, it's time to let the work go and begin anew. Sharing art is the price of making it. Exposing your vulnerability is the fee. As you deepen your participation in the creative act, you may come across a paradox. Ultimately, the act of self-expression is not about you, just as love is not about you. We feel compelled to engage as if by primal instinct. We must follow. To deny it is dispiriting. as if we were in violation. As Henry David Thoreau said, if a flower cannot live according to its nature, so it dies, so too a man. This is the call to self-express, our creative purpose. It's not necessarily to understand ourselves or to be understood. We share our prism, our way of seeing, in order to spark an echo in others. Art is the reverberation of the impermanence of life. As human beings, we come and go quickly, and we get to make works that stand as monuments to our time here. Enduring affirmations of existence. Michelangelo's David to the graffiti in a bathroom stall. From the first cave paintings to a child's finger-painted landscapes, they all echo the same cry: I was here. Creativity is an asymmetric skill. Once you can create something from nothing, it has the potential to scale infinitely. It can touch the lives of millions. It can give people hope or comfort the lonely or those in pain. It can carry you through darkness or help you relax in the light of the sun. It can live a life of decades, centuries, or millennia. The goal of art isn't to attain perfection, as the goal of any human life isn't to live in a perfect way. The goal is to share who we are and how we see the world. Art allows us to see what we are unable to see and yet already know. Efforts to portray a point of view on purpose often lead to a false representation. We hold on to stories about our perspective that are inaccurate and limiting. As Wayne Dyer said, when you squeeze an orange, what comes out is orange juice. When you get squeezed by life, whatever comes out is what's inside you. And part of that extract is a point of view you didn't even know that you had. It's baked into the art that you make and the opinions that you share. When you create, the art comes first, you come next, and the audience and third parties come last. There's an integrity to art. An idea is something pure, and our job is to transmute and transmit the idea in its purest form. Diluting the idea to appeal to an audience, a cultural trend, or to use it as a mouthpiece for a political agenda, or maximize its commercial potential, is to abuse the child the universe has entrusted you to nurture. You are the steward of this idea, and it is your job to support the idea into whatever it is supposed to be. It is not your job to change the idea or force it to conform to your agenda. The work of art serves its purpose independent of the creator's interest and social responsibility. Wanting to change people's minds about an issue or have an effect on society may interfere with the quality or purity of the work. This doesn't mean that the work won't have these latent effects. They often will. It often won't get there by planning them. In the creative process, it's more difficult to accomplish a goal by aiming at it. Deciding what's best to say in advance doesn't allow what's best to come through. It's best to wait until the work is finished before deciding what it's trying to say. Theme and motif will emerge independent of whatever you're trying to do. Holding your work hostage to meaning is just another limitation. As Oscar Wilde said, a little sincerity is a dangerous thing, and a great deal of it is absolutely fatal. Work that attempts to be overly preachy often doesn't connect as hoped, while a piece not intended to address a societal ill may become an anthem for a revolution. Art is far more powerful than our plans for it. Art can't be responsible or irresponsible. Art is above and beyond judgment. It can't be censored or deemed offensive. It either speaks to you or it doesn't. It either is for you or it isn't. An artist's only responsibility is to the art itself. If there's anything you might stand for, it would be to defend this creative autonomy. Not just from outside censors, but from the voices in your head that have internalized what is considered acceptable. The world is only as free as it allows its artists to be, and you are only as free as you allow yourself, in allowing yourself to be authentic and vulnerable. For parting words, I'll leave you with these. No matter what anyone tells you, words and ideas can change the world. Robin Williams. Beneath this mask is not merely flesh, but an idea. And what you fail to understand, Mr. Creedy, is that ideas are bulletproof. V from V for Vendetta. Lighten up, my friends. Go in peace to love and serve.